I'm Andrew Catchpole, as Richard was saying, editor of Harpers Wine and Spirit. And with me today are Dr. Arabella Woodrow, MW, wine director at Broadland Winery, which is a company most of you will know that can provide private label solutions for retailers, large or small. I have Ted Sambach, managing director of the Oxford Wine Company, one of the leading independent indie retail merchant groups and wholesalers, who recently stepped aside from the Vindependence buying group to work closely with a couple of similarly minded indie merchants in creating their own exclusive labels for the trade. And I have Clive Donaldson on my right, senior buying manager for wine sourcing at Morrison's, which has been highly innovative actually with new product development, bringing striking presentation and new format to the wine shelves as part of their own sort of private label programs. Okay, where are we at? Bulk wine is in the ascendancy, now counting for around 60% of wine sold in the UK. I've got various different figures here, so if anyone wants to correct me as we go along, that's great. Own and private label have obviously correspondingly risen too, each year taking a greater share of listings and shelf space. And this is no longer confined just to major multiples, which is perhaps part of the reason why Ted is here, but increasingly being seen as a route or valid option across both on and off trade, including smaller operators. I'm sure you've heard this morning about some of the benefits and challenges of bulk and creating private label programs, but some of the benefits aren't difficult to work out. Set against a backdrop of ever-increasing duty, a weak pound, squeezed margins for all, there are savings to be made with your own private label wines and private label programs. Private label, as I'm sure we'll hear, offer flexibility, both in terms of the juice in the bottle, the packaging, but also the margin. There's no comparison with anything else on the shelf. It's obviously exclusive to you. Meanwhile, I think bulk, as a background, has in the past had a slightly sort of dour reputation, let's put it that way. But I mean, my own experiences visiting some of the big bottlers in the UK recently and have sort of shown that the quality of bulk wine these days, the shipment, is at least equal to, and in some cases actually better because of QC and so on, than you might expect in terms of consistency through bottled wines. So bulk has risen to a level where the juice that you can get is can be fantastic. And it's kind of edging up in terms of where the entry price for wines that are bottled that way hit the shelves. I suppose finally, before I get the panel involved, there are environmental factors, and it kind of speaks for itself that the madness of shipping heavy glass containers around the world in an ever more environmentally concerned world just doesn't add up when the vast majority of wine is taken off the shelf and consumed within 48 hours. It just seems like a slightly strange kind of way of doing it. So fine, still put the wine in bottle, but if you can bring the juice to the UK or nearby in bottle, that just seems to make sense as well, and that's a story that carries increasingly positive weight with consumers. So how do you as a retailer tap into the world of private label? I want to begin just quickly running along the panel and see if we can agree a definition for private or exclusive label. Clive, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I've already in my presentation. So for me, private label is simply a label that I choose. It can be own label. It can also be an exclusive label, and therefore in doing that, offers me a couple of things. It offers me absolute individuality in what that product look and feel of it is. But also very important for me, it's exclusivity, and I can start to build customer loyalty.
Okay, we need to pass the mic on. Arabella.
Thank you. I would echo what Clive has said, but I'd also like to add is that because private label can give protection from price comparison with branded products, which are stocked maybe by everybody, then it does offer potentially higher margin for the retailer, and as well as enhancing the retailer's brand.
Perhaps Ted, yeah, you can pick up on that. Could you give us a little bit of background as to, in a way, why you're sitting here, kind of recent developments in terms of bringing exclusive label to Oxford Wine Co. You're working with a couple of other partners, I think.
Yes, this is a very recent development for us. We have been part of the Vindependents, and for various reasons we've drawn from that group. I'm working much more closely with other larger independent companies such as Cambridge Wine Merchants and others, and we're getting together to work together on bringing over containers under exclusive labels. We're geographically in different areas. There are other companies involved as well, perhaps 3 or 4 maximum. The great advantage of that is that we know there's always stock in the country if anybody suddenly has a huge sale, and we can beg, steal and borrow from others. We all know each other as friends, so we're never going to try and cross each other and sell into each other's areas, and to me it makes total sense. As far as the own label and my definition of own label, it is of course one that I've either taken off the shelf, is available from the company I'm buying from, but is exclusive to us in the UK, or it's a label we've designed. I'm the world's worst label designer, so I tend to use outside source.
Thank you. And Clive, maybe from the multiple perspective, anything to add in terms of those benefits that Ted has talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of challenge the conception that it's about cheapness, actually, and that's certainly not at Morrison's our view. It's simply another tool, and so when we build a range, we'll have brand, and then we'll have own brand, and we'll have exclusive label, and each one of those has strengths and weaknesses. So, you know, I'm very proud. I buy some McLaren Vale Grenache every year from 100-year-old vines. I ship it in a bespoke flexi bag, and I bought it in the UK. It's one of the most expensive wines that I stock. The fact that it happens to be bulk and is sourced in a bottom-up model, I buy it from the person that grows the vines, is irrelevant. So I do challenge the sort of preconception through this that it's about cheapness. It's about value, and value at whatever point that product sits. But yes, I mean, in terms of it allows you to go out, it simply allows me as a retailer to go out and choose every element of that product. And therefore, I have a very clear idea about the strategy I want to do. So the product that's right for Ted is very different to a product that might fit well on our shelves. And Arabella undoubtedly would like to, be part of that supply chain for all retailers. So yeah, a bit of a challenge on the preconception about cheapness, but actually it's about being able to. For me, it's more like a tailored suit. You know, it's a perfect fit for my retail environment.
Okay, maybe Arabella, you could just pick up on that, and from a supplier perspective, describe how you go about delivering those benefits to retailers.
Obviously, as a supplier, we wish to add value, because otherwise, what's the point of using us? And the ways that, as an importer and a bottler, we can add value is by making sure that everything goes right. Quality assurance and quality control is absolutely key to everything that we do. And that gives the reliability that our customers want. We can also try to iron out some of the problems that may be thrown at us. With the best will in the world, wine doesn't always arrive exactly to specification. There are slight variations between vintages or each batch, so we have to manage those as best we can. We also need to be very flexible in terms of quantities and volumes to meet the the customer's requirements to give the best service, because we want them always to be in stock. We want to make sure that the wine is in the best condition possible, and to do it all to time. We can also offer services in customer insight, which can get over a lot of the time-consuming things. What do our customers really want? By looking at data, at what market data to help plan better. And we can also, where necessary, offer assistance with blending of wines to get the best value for money of the liquid itself.
Yes, Ted, I mean, from a smaller retailer perspective, so I'm quite keen to get to the bottom of at what point it becomes worthwhile for a retailer to indulge in private or exclusive label. It's a kind of, I suppose, effort, or as we heard from David in the session before, complexity versus returns. And at what point does it tick over into the positive?
Well, I mean, there are lots of different ways of looking at this. I mean, we bring over a wine in 4 different ways. I have to stress, obviously, we're very different from my colleagues here on the panel. I mean, the first thing to have an exclusive label, of course, is to buy from a small winery. And I have staff over at Vinasud and Provine always looking for good, small, interesting wineries that perhaps don't export. That, in a sense, is an exclusive label. The other way, of course, is designing your own label and sharing containers. We're also working at the moment with Boutonneau, for example. Now, we don't, as a retailer and a wholesaler, want Boutonneau products in all our shops necessarily, because they are quite well known. But if we can pick a wine that we really enjoy and we can get it put under our own label, obviously for a guaranteed minimum purchase, then that's very attractive. And particularly with a company like Boutonneau, who bottle a lot in France, they're able to hold the stock for us. We commit to a certain amount during the course of the year between perhaps 2 or 3 different companies. And as long as we make sure we take that stock, it hasn't got to be taken over directly, which is extremely good for cash flow, of course. Also, we bring over a wine, perhaps in 3 or 4 pallets at a time, from places like LGI in the south of France. So there are all sorts of ways of doing it. But for us, it doesn't matter how small or how large it is. An exclusive is exclusive.
Arabella, do you want to pick up on that and from your perspective?
Yes, this is one of the beauties of bulk, in that if you're bringing over bulk containers of certain wines regularly, you don't have to pack it all under one label. So we can do minimum order quantities, which are attractive to our smaller customers under their labels, as well as other customers who may have bigger requirements, so that we've always got stock for you, and it isn't particularly onerous in terms of stock cover. And that's also a good thing, because let's say it's a fresh white wine. You don't want to be bottling masses under any individual label and then find 6 months later it's lost its freshness.
Okay, thanks. And Clive, any comments to add to that? And also interested, you mentioned before the relationship actually between having, or rather a portfolio that encompasses private label, hard brands, et cetera, and giving you the sort of flexibility. What's the relationship like between private label? Does it cannibalize from other parts of the portfolio, or?
Not for us. I mean, when we put together a retail offer, then we look at which type of product would suit that offer. So I don't want duplication. There's no point me stocking 2 wines really that do the same thing. It's just wasted space on my shelf. So everything that I've got, I have a very clear idea about what I want that product to do and where it sits. And that could very well be a mainstream brand. But if I want maybe to offer something that's different to that, then I can go and bespoke the liquid, working directly with one of the many good quality wine producers that we all know. And then I can package it in such a way, and even if it sits on the shelf, say it was nominally Australian Shiraz, you can still get two very, very different offerings. I suppose an example would be New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. Quite often people would view it as being a bit of a commodity. A lot of the branded offerings blend wines from around the Wairau Valley, a bit of Awatri, and create quite a homogenous style. With my own label, I don't want that. I want to offer the customer something different. So my own label is almost pure Awatri. So it's not about, so when the customer comes in, they can choose a brand, and if that gives them a good confidence in that, that's fine. But if they want to choose my own brand, they're going to get a real individual expression and a little bit more depth and insight. Or look, if they just want to pick it up and like it, then that's good enough for me. But it's about providing the fine detail within your range and making sure every product is different. And sometimes, if I'm honest, I just struggle to find either producer or branded products that are different enough or satisfy the right product at the right price in the right style that I want on my shelf. So for me, it's about being able to paint that picture for a consumer and giving those differences the breadth of choice rather than anything else, really.
Thanks. I'm interested in new product development, how you begin and then go about ensuring that you find the right partner to work with for a private label program. Torn between whether or not to start with the supplier or the retailer here. But Arabella, perhaps you could. What do retailers need to come to you, and what are the right questions to be asking you? What do they need to kind of present you with so that you can do a good job on their behalf?
Okay, I would say that it's an understanding of each other's, wishes and capacities. To know, is it more important, for example, to have somebody that won't get out of bed for less than 3 or 4 containers in one run, or somebody who can be very flexible and turn supply on and off? If it's a packer such as ourselves, what's our QC like? Is our equipment like? Can we offer different formats? What is the range and age of our equipment, and so on. But one really important thing is to understand is the likely volumes of wine that you're going to need, because if both parties have a clear idea of that, then we're best able to deliver it. Because what's very difficult to manage is somebody telling us they're going to do 200,000 cases a year, and it turns out to be 1/10 of that, because it's not just the bottling runs, it's the ordering of dry goods and things like that. And with the best will in the world, sometimes the forecast isn't right. So it's all about communication, talking about it, amending the plan as you go along, so that each party understands what's needed and what reality is, as opposed to what the original plan was.
Ted, can you add to that in terms of the scales that you're working at? What are the parameters?
Well, I mean, the scale's a difficult thing. What I would like to say is I'm very pleased that 1 or 2 bottlers are far more flexible these days than they ever used to be, which makes it an awful lot easier for us. I mean, the number of people who will now stop a bottling line and be happy to bottle 3,000 or 6,000 own label wines is increasing, and that makes it much easier for us. There was a time some years ago when no one was interested in people like us in creating own labels, but nowadays there is that flexibility and that care and need to do so. So thank you.
Okay, let's move on to, and soonish, we've got a fairly short slot, another 10 minutes or so. I want to open it up to audience Q&A. But I just wanted to consider, when creating a private label program or range, new label, how much thought should you put into that early on in terms of looking ahead to expansion or growing tiers within that label? Is that something that you've played around with, Clive?
Yeah, I mean, I think the supermarkets are very much well used to that. So for us, it starts absolutely with, I keep talking about, have a range, have an idea what you want the product to be. have an idea of what offer you want to give the customer. And so if you say, well, actually, I want to create something that, say, premium own label, then that automatically starts to define the sorts of things that you would be likely to put within that range. So, you know, for us, if it sits within own label, it should really have some sort of good customer recognition. So Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc might be a Shiraz. Then maybe my strategy may be, well, actually, we want to take customers maybe to some places that, you know, they wouldn't normally go. So if they normally buy a Barossa Shiraz, can I find an interesting alternative? And so for me, it all starts with the concept of what you want that product to do. And then once you understand what the product concept is, then obviously you look around. And I will simply be looking for the best option. If it turns out that the best option is a branded product, then fine, I'll go and stock a branded product. But where a lot of our private label ranges have come from is when we can't actually find something that is exactly what we want. And obviously a branded product is driven by the brand. It's their input. And I've got a very specific retail situation, and the chances of those two things overlapping perfectly is quite small. So therefore you would end up making a compromise potentially by putting a product that's maybe not quite right for what you want to achieve. But yeah, decide on the product first. And then in terms of hierarchies, then yeah, there's definitely, if it's own label, there's certain things, you know, every retailer in the UK has their own, and certainly premium own label. I think customers are really understanding the value that's there at the minute and that we're able to deliver. So within that product concept, there will be a certain look and feel. And again, for me, it's about choices. Do I want something that looks quite classic? And so for our premium and own label, they're all individual. And others have chosen something different. So others have chosen very much a family feel. But that gets into, if you understand what the products you want to do, you'll understand what your occasion you're trying to satisfy for the customer, and therefore that to a certain extent will influence your choice as to the look and feel of the product. So for me, it very much starts with understanding. In terms of expansion, well, we obviously, you know, there's about a 3-year life cycle on products certainly within our retail environment. And so, you know, that doesn't always evolve revolution, it can be evolution. But there's a certain period of time where you go back and you look and refresh. But the advantage of private label is that you can be quite provocative, you can be entrepreneurial. If you suddenly see a wine at a producer that is absolutely amazing and represents outstanding value, just grab it and find a label that, you know, captures that and puts it on shelf. And for us, we've used it as a mechanism really to drive some innovation. And so it is about having that concept. So a longer term, possibly for own label, and then certainly the exclusive labels that we do, you know, can be a bit more disruptive, a bit more fun. Maybe put a label style out there that you normally don't see from a region. Certain regions have real, you know, certain look and feel. We all look at a label and say that's a Bordeaux label, or you know that's a Sancerre label. Well, actually, maybe it might be good to challenge the consumer. The consumer in the UK is really fortunate. They get to try wines from a huge amount of geographic locations, and therefore actually they might like to see a slightly different style that isn't at home in that region.
That's great, and I think it's a really incredibly valid point you're making in terms of whether it's being disruptive or guiding consumers to somewhere they may not actually otherwise have gone. So rather than, in fact, sort of closing down choices, it can actually help to expand the consumer repertoire as well. And I think we've seen that in some of the more premium ranges, especially that, I mean, Morrison's has been innovative, and some of your competitors have also, you know, done some good things, so that's good. Right, I'm going to throw it open to Q&A. Just want a very quick word from Arabella, if I may, just in terms of research and what people like Broadland, companies like Broadland can offer, where you're quite active, aren't you, in terms of going to retailers and saying, look, we've identified this gap or this hole or this opportunity in the market. Do you just want a quick word about that value that you can add from that side?
Yes, we invest quite a lot in consumer research, and it's really so that, to take Clive's point from earlier, we go the extra mile because so that you don't have to, because you've got your hands full with so many different categories at multiple grocers. So if we can bring useful information to the table, then and not just about consumer insight, but also what's happening on the ground in the producer countries, then it's meant to add value for you.
Okay, thanks. Any questions for our panel out there? I'm just aware of time flying past. Yes, thanks. We should have a mic coming around, actually.
Hello. This question is for Clive Donaldson mainly, but also for the whole panel. The assumption is that the margins are higher for own label wines. Is that the case? And is the margin changing in any way?
I actually disagree with that. I mean, we're not, be careful what I say here, but we really operate on a flat margin at Morrison's. So we don't look to make more margin on certain products. If I can get it cheaper, I'll put it on the shelf cheaper and I'll aim to drive volume.
And I think Ted wanted a quick word on that as well.
I have to say just the opposite for a company like ours. On own label, exclusive label, we will definitely try and make a higher margin. We can get away with making a higher margin. The quality, of course, has got to be there. Quality-price ratio is absolutely vital. But I am taking a bit of a risk as a smaller company in bringing over half a container or number of pallets over, and I need to make sure that I sell it, and I need to make sure I sell it at a good price. We're not looking at, with own label, we're not looking at bottom end. We're looking at sort of $7.99 to $11.99 for our exclusive labels, which will sell both in retail shops and are also value enough to sell to the trade. And we obviously, the trade is vital to us because that's where we get our volume.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Anna, I think. So I'm blinded by the light here. We've got.
Thank you. Hi, it's a question for Ted, if you can share this. Just, I think it's great what the concept that you're doing. I was curious to know if you can share how many SKUs you've decided to bring and risk it, as you say.
At this stage, probably we've only got about 10 to 15 products at the moment that are under own label. We have others that are under fairly exclusive labels, but not entirely. But this is something we're looking to address at the moment. And this is exactly the project that was referred to earlier with other similar-sized wine merchants, trying to develop more and more own labels to get away from being compared too readily from what else is very much around in the retail world.
I mean, Anna, do you give us a word on own and private label at Oddbins, and how is that increasingly important for you, less so, or what's your?
We started with a very, very small base, and if I were to look the last 18 months even, we've probably grown to about 5 or 6 in terms of pure exclusive bulk UK bottled wines. So from a very small base, but actually it's increased quite quickly for all the reasons that we discussed earlier in terms of quality, cost savings, point of difference.
Okay, thanks. There's a minute or two left. Anyone else want to jump in there? Yes, that's far away.
Again, I'm just coming back to the super. I mean, it's for all of you, but perhaps possibly more for Clive. It's interesting about the flat margin. Is it nevertheless a growing category for you because you're finding that brands don't have exactly what you need, and you get better sales, and therefore you're growing this part of the business?
Yeah, it really isn't necessarily about cost for us. It's about bespoke, and that's really important. And as a retailer, I want to drive points of differentiation. We at Morris, we're out there, we're working with wine makers around the world. Why wouldn't you want to capture that and put it on a shelf in something that is absolutely exclusive to you? And so I really use it to drive loyalty, to drive value, cost. Obviously, if it turns out to be costlier than a branded product, there's no point in doing it. So, their cost is obviously part of it, but cost isn't the driver for us. It's very much about differentiation.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we'll wrap up there. I'm sure you're all keen. You've been here a while, I'm aware, through several sessions this morning. Hopefully been informative and interesting, and I'm sure Ted, Clive and Arabella will be around at least for a little bit of time if you wanted to collar them with any quick private questions. So thanks for listening to us, and I hope you enjoy the fantastic looking show out there. I'll leave you with one thought. I'd emailed a week or so ago Andrew Shaw, the buying director at Conviviality, to ask him if he'd like to come along and pitch in with his pennyworth here, and he can't because he's in Tanzania sunning himself, which is obviously quite painful with the snowy conditions outside. But it was a quip of him that it reminded me of a couple of London wine fairs ago when we were talking about bulk wine. And he pointed out that all wine spends some time in tank or barrel or somewhere, so effectively all wine is bulk at some stage of its life, which I thought might be a little note to kind of leave it on. So thanks to the panel. Thank you.